All right, let's dive into one of the absolute wildest political stories you'll ever hear. Seriously. It's a tale you've probably heard before, but trust me, the real story is way, way stranger than the legend.
So let's just get right to it. Did a Roman emperor actually make his horse a politician? I mean, it sounds like a complete joke, right? But believe it or not, people have been arguing about this for 2,000 years.
Okay, so the legend starts with this guy, Emperor Caligula. He's in charge of Rome from 37 to 41 CE. And you gotta picture this. He's young, he has all the power in the world, and, well, let's just say he had a reputation for being completely off the rails.
Now, this emperor, he had a favorite horse, a prize racehorse, a magnificent stallion named Incitatus. And Caligula didn't just like this horse, no, he was totally, utterly obsessed with him.
So, in what has to be the most insane political move ever, he supposedly makes Incitatus a Roman consul. Now, you have to understand, a consul was the highest office in the entire Roman world. It's basically like making your horse the president. It's just unbelievable.
So there you have it, the legend of the horse politician. But let's dig into the details a bit, because the story claims this horse was really, truly living the high life.
And the details? They get even wilder. We're talking a stable made of solid marble, an ivory manger to eat from, a collar literally dripping with precious gems. He even had his own team of servants. This wasn't just some honorary title, it was a full-on VIP lifestyle for a horse. Okay, it's an amazing story, for sure. But here's the big question. Is it real history? Or is it just 2,000-year-old gossip? To figure that out, we've got to do some detective work and look at the actual sources. So, let's check the evidence. Who actually wrote this stuff down? And more importantly, when did they write it?
And boom, right away, we hit a huge red flag. The two guys who do tell this story, Suetonius and Dio Cassius, well, they were writing way, way after Caligula was dead. We're talking 80 years for one, and over 150 for the other. That's a really long time. But check this out. The historians who were actually alive back then, writing as it all went down, not a peep. They don't mention it at all.
And if you zoom in on what our main source, Suetonius, actually wrote, it gets even more telling. He doesn't say, Caligula made his horse a consul. He says, it is said that he planned to. You know what that is? That's the ancient Roman version of sources say, or I heard from a guy who heard from a guy. It's pure rumor. So here's the real kicker. The people who were actually there, who wrote down all the other shocking things Caligula did in painstaking detail, they say nothing about a horse in the Senate. Nothing. And that silence, it speaks volumes.
Okay, so with all that in mind, what do modern historians think really went down? Let's get to the truth behind this incredible myth.
Yeah, the consensus today is pretty clear. This almost certainly didn't happen literally. Most experts think it was probably one of two things. Either a wild joke told at a party, or, and this is the more popular theory, it was a calculated insult, a way to publicly humiliate the Roman Senate. The chance he actually appointed the horse, almost zero. So you've got this stark contrast, right? The myth is, Caligula was so clinically insane, he made his horse a government official. The reality is probably more like, Caligula threatened to do it as a nasty way of showing the senators they were totally useless. And you can bet his enemies absolutely loved that story and ran with it. It was perfect propaganda.
And that's really the heart of it all. This wasn't just random madness. It was a vicious political jab. It was Caligula basically looking at the most powerful men in Rome and saying, you know what? My horse could do your job. That's how little I think of every single one of you.
So, if the story isn't actually true, then why do we all know it? Why are we still talking about this 2,000 years later? How did this one myth become more famous than almost anything else Caligula actually did? Well, this is pretty much a textbook example of how a historical myth gets made. You start with a little seed of truth. Caligula really did despise the Senate. Then his enemies take that and blow it way out of proportion. Then, years later, historians hear the juicy gossip and write it down. And before you know it, after centuries of being retold, that gossip turns into what everyone accepts as fact. So the real lesson here isn't just a funny story about a horse. It's a huge reminder to always question your sources. It's also a perfect, timeless metaphor for how absolute power can corrupt absolutely. And maybe, most importantly, it's a warning about what happens when leaders start mocking the very institutions they're supposed to lead. This isn't just ancient history. It's a lesson in power and propaganda that is, frankly, just as relevant today.
And that leaves us with one final, kind of chilling thought. The fact that this story was so believable, that for centuries people just accepted it, that tells us something really deep about power, doesn't it? It shows us that when a leader gets absolute, unchecked power, the absurd doesn't just feel possible, it starts to feel expected.